Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Healy, and I have type 2 diabetes. The reason that I'm recording this and sharing it with everybody is, probably 2.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it's been sort of an interesting process. Many people don't know that I have it. It's not something that I really identify with, I guess, and share with everybody, but the reality of it is that it's kind of a changer in the way that you approach everything in your world. And I think that we have a massive, massive problem with type 2 diabetes. Hundreds of millions of people either have it or don't know they have it and have it. The medical community doesn't deal with it very well. They don't know how to. So part of what this video is for, and really it's a series of videos. I'm going to kind of do a video diary of a process that I'm going through and share it. I think that the more we can get out, the more we can share this information, the better. And I think that this is a massive, massive problem. People are becoming diabetic at a crazy, crazy rate. So just to give you a little history, like I said, about 2.5 years ago, myself and my wife and my daughter moved to Sedona, Arizona. Big life change. I thought I should get a doctor just because I hadn't had one for years and years and years, and I'd been to the doctor maybe 3 times in probably 20 years. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of establish one new town and stuff like that. So went to the doctor, and she did all the initial tests and says, "Yeah, I think you have diabetes." I'm like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" So at the time when I went in, my blood sugars, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but my blood sugars were, I think, 325. They should be 85 is normal, average normal person. A1C, which is the blood test and kind of how they determine if you have diabetes or you're having problems with it. Mine was 8.3. The normal should be 4.8-ish. So there was an issue, and the more I researched it, I realized that looking at dying from diabetes, most people die based on complications, right? So with diabetes, your sugars are elevated in your blood, which is what most people think diabetes is. Actually, diabetes type 2 particularly is a hyperinsulinemia in the blood. So your insulin keeps increasing to try to shove the sugar out of the blood, and it just becomes ineffective because essentially you become insulin resistant. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but the reality of it is I had to change a lot of stuff. I thought I ate pretty good, but I ate a lot of carbs. Rice and beans and things that we would consider to be healthy were pushing me into this insulin resistant state. So like I said, 8.3 A1C is not good news. Basically, you're on the road to having heart attack, stroke, kidney failure, impotency, Alzheimer's, amputations, you name it. It's all part of diabetes. Honestly, a lot of people that have heart attacks and stroke, I would guess probably have diabetes. They just don't know it, maybe. So the reason for this video blog, like I said, or this video diary is I'm going through a process right now. I've gone through a process over the last 2.5 years of looking at how to kind of fix this. So what I have done, and this is by no means the answer per se, but it's what's worked for me. I transitioned to sort of a paleo diet, essentially, carbohydrates from a diabetic perspective. And again, we're not talking about weight loss or aesthetics or anything like that. I'm just looking at how do I make myself healthy. So number one thing is to obviously get rid of refined sugars, which I did for the most part. I still had a cookie here and there, but, for the most part, greatly reduced my carbohydrate intake. Again, kind of that paleo ketogenesis kind of diet works relatively well for a lot of people based on just getting the sugars out of the blood so you can drop your sugar levels. So in about a year, I dropped my A1C from 8.3 to 5.8, I think. Yeah, 5.8, which is awesome. And so, but it's still not normal. And what I noticed is that when I ate any kind of carbs, my sugar levels would jump up. My average sugar levels, day to day, I take my blood and I test it, and they're probably anywhere from 100 to 140. Again, they should be about 85 ideally. So, going through this process, I learned to control my blood sugars pretty well. I was taking metformin, which is a diabetes drug. Now, the problem with metformin is for most people, for a lot of people, I don't know if most people is the case, but one of the side effects is gastrointestinal, discomfort. And aside from, there's tendon and ligament challenges with it and things like that, I didn't like it. It just didn't feel good in my body. But I took it for a couple years more because I couldn't have high blood sugars. Now, as I've researched this, what I'm finding is that, a lot of particularly with type 2 diabetes. So we're talking about type 2, we're not talking about type 1. Type 1 is where your pancreas doesn't produce insulin anymore and you have to take insulin to be able to get those sugars out of your blood. Type 2, your pancreas is still sort of working, it's just not very effective, or you're really insulin resistant, which I think is the case for most people. So realistically, what happened is I was taking metformin, it was working, my blood sugars were down, my A1C came down, everything looked good. But what I've realized is that a lot of the risk factors associated, like the heart disease and stroke and all of this stuff that I sort of listed off earlier, isn't necessarily helped a ton when your blood sugars look good, your A1C looks good. They're still there. So that bugged me. Aside from the fact that I just didn't feel great on metformin. So I kind of played with it. I played with how do I decrease what I'm taking, control my food a little bit more, really do it through diet. And it worked to some extent. But again, what I realized is, let's say I went out and had a couple pieces of pizza. My sugars would jump up. They would get to 180, 190, even up to above 200. And it wasn't like I was eating that differently. So what this said to me was, okay, you have massive insulin resistance. So how do I fix that? So I started looking into not just how do I treat the symptom, which is really what a lot of diabetes treatments are doing, really pretty much all. If you go to the doctor, more than likely they're going to prescribe you something like metformin. You're treating the symptoms. You're just shoving the sugar out of the blood, pushing it into the cell. Which on one hand, I guess is good because your sugar levels are going down. If you don't have sugars in the blood, they're not doing damage to the vessels as much and stuff like that. But it's still not really effectively treating the problem, treating the problem, not the symptom. So when I started looking at this, I thought, okay, how do I fix my cells? How do I go from a health perspective with this thing and really effectively change the sensitivity in my cells? And which sort of leads me to where I am today. So what I've done is I've started playing with fasting. And I don't know how I came across this, but I started reading up on fasting and finding information on it. And aside from diabetes, it's a really, really interesting health benefiting process from everything I've seen. What I've actually looked at is this book here. I would highly recommend it. It's by Dr. Jason Fung. He's out of Canada. This is a really good read, by the way. But from a diabetic perspective, so Jason Fung is a physician who basically is working in the dialysis scene, and was noticing that his patients just, it's like they're not getting better, right? From a type 2 diabetes perspective. And really that's what we see if you look at the information out there and do a little bit of research on it, is that the normal process is, okay, I'm type 2 diabetic. I go to my doctor, I get diagnosed, and usually you're not diagnosed until you're at least above a 7 A1C. Honestly, I had a blood test, it's been probably 10 years now ago, for a life insurance policy, and I didn't think anything of it. Nobody mentioned anything about it. But after I got diagnosed here, I went back and looked at the blood results there. I was at a 6.8 then, and A1C, and nobody mentioned anything about it. So, like I said, if we're looking at fixing the cell, fasting is a really interesting process. So I've been fasting, sort of what we would call intermittent fasting for the last 20 to 30 days or so. And what they find, again, from a diabetic perspective, is that the issue that we have from an insulin sensitivity perspective is we have too much insulin because our liver's kicking stuff out, our pancreas is liver's kicking sugar out, pancreas is pushing out insulin to try to keep up with the liver, and we have this system that's sort of broken, so we always have too much insulin. So like I said, part of the process in the medical industry is that you get, like I did, you get diagnosed, you get prescribed metformin or something like that. Metformin starts to not work quite as well. I think it's sort of hard on the kidneys, and your kidney function starts to get affected by that. Over time, metformin stops working quite so well. So a lot of people will get stepped up. So they go to injectable insulin at that point. Again, it's kind of like treating alcoholism with pushing more alcohol, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Why would we treat diabetes, which is a hyperinsulinemia perspective, with more insulin? So, my goal is to how do I essentially increase the sensitivity of insulin in my cells. So, again, looking at the fasting thing, I started probably 20 or 30 days ago. I can't remember exactly when, but I've done a number of fasts. I've done the short term was like 24-hour fast, so I'll eat dinner. I won't eat again until dinner time. And the goal with this is to get into what we call a ketogenic state, which basically you're burning through all of your sugar. So I don't have sugar in my system. My liver's not kicking out sugar. And I have to make a transition to using fat, essentially, for energy. A lot of people get worried about fasting and the effectiveness and the safety of it. And he mentions it in this book, Jason Fung does, that the world record, I think, on record at least, was like 381 days. Crazy, with no side effects. He did take supplements in terms of just the basic stuff that he needed in his system to help that, but crazy. You can fast for a long time and it's totally safe. And again, I would read the book to get more information on that. Not that I'm pushing his book. I just think it's interesting information. So I've done a number of 24-hour fasts where I eat dinner and then I don't eat again until dinner the next day. I've done a couple 24-hour fasts, 48-hour fasts. I've done 3 of those. I just got off one last week. And it's interesting. When I do this, my blood sugars will be down in the 90s, mid-90s, by the time I'm done. The really interesting thing, we have what we call the dawn effect. Some people do. There's what's called the dawn effect, which means kind of about 4 or 5, your body's going through a process of waking up. So it kicks out sugars, it kicks out insulin. Cortisol increases, stuff increases to basically wake you up. It happens about 4 or 5 in the morning. So every morning my sugar levels are higher. And I was like, what is going on? I mean, they were at 95 when I go to bed, or 100 when I go to bed, and they're 130 or 140 when I wake up. So this was, again, learning about that dawn effect and starting to go, okay, what's going to happen with my cells? So the last time I did the 48-hour fast was really an interesting thing because I went to bed. I was at 95. I went actually that night. It was just a couple days ago. Went and had burgers and steaks and steaks and beers with a friend of mine. So you're thinking, I'd be surprised if it wasn't a little higher just because of the beer. And actually, it was, like I said, it was like 95 or 97, and I woke up and it was at like 106. So crazy, so what's happening with my cells is, are they becoming more sensitive? The kicker with this is I haven't gotten into a ketogenic state yet, which really, if you have a normal, healthy body, it should happen relatively quickly. You're going to burn through your sugar stores, your liver stops pushing it out, and you transition. So my goal with the fasting thing is I know that if I can get into a ketogenic state, I'm getting to the point where I'm affecting my cells. So that's really what this sort of video diary is I want to track it and I want to be able to share it. And so firsthand, what's happening to me this morning, my blood sugars were at 130. I had a couple cookies last night, which is probably why. My weight, this is the other thing, is with this kind of a fasting process, clearly you're going to lose weight just from a caloric deficit perspective, generally speaking. A lot of people worry about losing muscle mass and stuff like that. Obviously, you got to lift if you want to maintain that, and I do 4 days a week or so. But with that dawn effect, you also kick out, as your body starts to get into that ketosis state, it starts to kick out growth hormone too. It increases by like 15%. So you don't lose muscle mass if you're lifting and doing what you should to maintain it. So my weight, this is the other piece. My weight, this morning I was 183. Last time I did a 2-day, I dropped down to 180.8 or something like that. I was 182.8 this morning. My cycle with this is I'll lose weight when I'm fasting, obviously, and then when I eat, it kind of jumps back up, whether that be kind of salt intake and stuff like that. with my food. It's not because I'm eating a ton more. It's just I think there's a reaction with my body maintaining or holding on to water. So anyway, I would love for everybody to kind of track with this with me if you're interested. I think this could be a silver bullet, actually, to be honest, for diabetes. You got to change it at the cellular level. You can't just medicate it and take the drugs that are being pushed out there because they're probably making the problem worse. For me, I've gotten off metformin. I've transitioned to what's called berberine, which is studies have shown that it's pretty much as effective as metformin is natural. So I like that option much better. And when I first started fasting, I was in transition with that, so it was a little bit weird in terms of my numbers. But I'll share as I go through. If you're interested in tracking this with me, or you know somebody with diabetes, which I pretty much guarantee you do, I think this is an interesting alternative. It's something that we need to figure out, and because there's a massive problem with this. So I encourage you to follow along if you're interested. I'll put these out for the next few days. I'll put one out every day just because I'll give you updates on kind of what's going on with my fasting process. I'm going to do a 3-day right now, so I'm starting now. I won't eat again until Friday night, just to give you an idea of what my life's like. And I'll talk about what it's like to fast and what it feels like, and it's not as bad as people think. It's really mostly mental. So anyway, I encourage you to follow along, and I'm excited to share with all you. All right, have a great day, you guys.